I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. I was terrified. I didn't know what this meant. And it ultimately meant that I had to leave my post as the president, as a pediatrician, because this woman went on to file police charges against me. The criminal justice system took over eventually. However, they kind of didn't do a really good investigation and in fact, never spoke to me. The next thing I heard is that I should turn myself in because charges were being brought against me.
Welcome to the Doctor's Mentor Show. If you believe that medicine is an industry and not a profession, if you enjoy submitting complex reimbursement claims, or you would do another residency just for fun, be advised, you're about to be offended. You should probably leave now.
All this talk about mentoring doctors is ridiculous. I thought doctors learned to do everything better than everyone else the first year of medical school. At least that's the way they act.
If you love assisting patients with vitality breakthroughs, if the right to practice medicine without interference is important, and you want expert tips for practice freedom and profits to support your epic life, welcome aboard and prepare to be blown away. The Doctor's Mentor Show starts now. Here's your host, Dr. Lori Barr.
Riddle me this. Name something that you should never let a dictionary define. If you can answer this riddle, and if you can actually implement the answer, I guarantee you will be freer than 99% of the population of the world. Want the answer? Keep listening.
Today's topic. Live.
So do you know the answer to this riddle? Well, today's guest is going to explain to you exactly what that answer is.
Today's guest.
I'm so excited to have with me Dr. Jarrett Patton. He goes by Dr. Jarrett, and Dr. Patton is an experienced pediatrician, well-loved in Eastern Pennsylvania for the thousands of children that he treated year after year through the cold and through the summers and all the fractures and all the earaches. He's done all that. He trained at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio, and then went on to do a number of fellowships so that he knew exactly how to serve his patients in a way that they adored him. And not only that, then he became a leader in his hospital network and went through the ranks so that he actually was president of the medical staff. So I have for you today, Dr. Jarrett, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Lori. I feel very welcome. Thank you for having me today.
Now, Dr. Jarrett wrote a book, and you're going to be so excited to hear. It's called License to Live. And in this book, not only does he answer that riddle, but he gives you all the clues you need to do something that nobody wants to admit they might have to do. What is that thing, Dr. Jarrett?
Well, that thing is to have and survive a career transition. And there are certain ways you can go through a career transition. In fact, it can be something that you plan and go forward with. But in my case, it was a sudden transition.
Okay, so since we're talking about definitions today, let's define career transition. And you just did that to some extent. But in case you're thinking, oh, transition is when I get out of residency and start my fellowship. That's true. Transition is when I get out of fellowship and go into practice. That's true. Transition is when I change practices. That's true. Transition is also when somebody walks into your office and tells you you're fired and starts cleaning out your desk. Transition is also when all of a sudden you have a stroke. Transition is also when you're in a car accident and you can no longer walk. Transition is also when you fall skiing and hit a tree and can no longer think right. And transition, of course, is when you retire out of practice and decide to implement all those amazing skills you've gained from all your years of practice and apply them to something else. So which transition would you like to focus on today, Dr. Jarrett?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because each of your examples, Lori, I know a specific person that has gone through that, whether it's the skiing accident, the car accident, a stroke. All of these are real life situations. But today, I think we will focus on the one that comes very suddenly and unexpected when you are simply told that you can no longer work here.
You know, just hearing you say that, it actually gives me chills, because that is so viscerally scary to somebody like most doctors who really almost defines themselves by being a doctor, right?
That's correct.
So maybe we should answer that riddle for everybody. So the riddle was, name something you should never let a dictionary define. And what is the answer to that riddle?
The answer to that riddle would be yourself. You should never let someone else define who you are. You should make your own definition.
And that is what Dr. J lives by, right?
That's
never
correct.
let anyone else define who you are. Make your own definition. So that came through big struggle for you. It did come from a career transition that was unexpected. And what was the first thing that happened that, as far as when you found out that you were no longer going to be able to practice? I mean, how long did it take you to get over just the shock of that?
It was a tremendous experience for me. Throughout all of my childhood, wanting to be a doctor, going through college, medical school, residency, additional programs to hone my skills and training, I wanted nothing more than to serve my community in pediatrics. And that is something I love to do. It's something that I did very well. My patients grew to love me and follow me throughout my own many transitions in my career. Over time, my leadership skills were very apparent as I led and grew a clinic from two doc practice to about an 8 doc practice with 8 nurse practitioners.
That's a big practice.
And it led me to become the division chief of general pediatrics. And ultimately, as you mentioned before, became the president of the medical staff of an 8 hospital network. And this oversaw about 1,300 doctors and about 600 advanced practice clinicians.
Wow.
So it was a lot of people that were under my leadership. So I felt as if I was going toward the pinnacle of my career. I was practicing medicine. I was making change on a larger scale throughout a hospital system that would benefit everyone, not only within pediatrics, but everyone that touched the system. I felt like I was doing exactly what I was put here on earth. Until one day, I came to a meeting that I typically have with one of the hospital attorneys, who sat down and looked at me with some anguish in his face and said, Dr. Patton, I hate to tell you this, but you're under investigation.
Now, wait a second. Again, here come the chills. If you're new to medical practice, there's a couple of things that happen that just change you as a human being forever. One is when you lose a patient, of course. Like, that is the most unbelievable feeling, and one that I hope you never experience. Another, though, is when you get served papers like that you have to appear in court, or just what you said, you're under investigation. And then what happened?
I felt like I was in a vacuum. I was in this glass-walled room, and everything seemed like it was getting farther and farther away from me. I asked, what was this about? I had no idea what he was talking about. He showed me a picture of a woman and said, do you recognize this woman? And I looked and I didn't recognize her. He went on to say, this woman has complained that you were inappropriate with her while examining her baby.
Oh my goodness.
I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. I was terrified. I didn't know what this meant. And it ultimately meant that I had to leave my post as the president, as a pediatrician, because this woman went on to file police charges against me. The criminal justice system took over eventually. However, they kind of didn't do a really good investigation and in fact, never spoke to me. The next thing I heard is that I should turn myself in because charges were being brought against me a couple of months later.
Oh my goodness.
This was just devastating to me because you're being placed under attack. And when you're being placed under attack, especially if there's no wrongdoing, you feel like you are being thrown under a bus. You are being discarded. All the people that knew and love you just turn their back and look the other way, particularly what happened with the healthcare system. But it also showed me that I had to do other things, because from the time I was arrested, I lost my medical license in Pennsylvania. I lost my medical license in New York. I lost my DEA certification. My American Board of Pediatrics certification was under review. And that's where my journey began. At rock bottom, that title physician just kind of left my own vocabulary because I was so disillusioned with what had happened to me.
How long ago did that happen?
It happened about 2 years ago.
Okay, so it's fairly recent.
Yes.
It's like when a child has a parent who dies. You grow up fast, right?
Yes.
In hindsight, what is the first thing someone should do when they get that kind of unexpected news and when they know they're going to be under a microscope? What's the first thing they should do?
Well, the first thing you should do is make sure that you get some sort of legal representation, whether it is an employment lawyer, if this is a termination situation. In my case, this was a criminal investigation, so I got a criminal defense attorney that helped see me through this process, because when you have no experience in any of these systems and an adverse relationship, you need someone that has been there and that can help you do that. And that's exactly what an attorney will do.
Okay. All right. So get an attorney. That's the first thing. And then, you were talking about feeling so alone. What did you do to find camaraderie? Who could you talk? Could you even talk to your family about this? I mean, what do you do?
Well, and that's exactly what you have to do. You have to reach out to your support system, the support system that has always been there for you. And that was my wife, my children, my extended family, and my friends, who knew immediately when this news story broke, which was highly publicized, that they knew me as an individual. They knew this wasn't the case, and they could start to see through what was really going on here. So your support system is key. The second thing I'll put there is make sure that you're taking care of yourself, because you're going to be under an incredible amount of stress. And we all stressed out during medical school, taking tests and our USMLEs and our board exams and our board certifications. But this is a completely different level of stress. So you must take care of yourself, whether it's through your diet and exercise, the basics. But even in my case, I knew before I even had difficulty with behavioral health symptoms, I sought out a counselor right away to help let me have a venue to talk these feelings out of isolation, betrayal, and neglect.
What I hear you saying is, this is the same as if you were taken hostage, taken prisoner. I mean, this is that kind of stress. This gets you back to, if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you're right back down to survivor, right? You're at the basics, okay? That is extremely stressful. If you have anything you're not taken care of, you certainly have the opportunity to manifest both physical and mental illness during those times of stress, for sure. So that's super advice. Tell me exactly, what did you do to help yourself diet-wise and help yourself physically? You said you sought out a counselor for the mental part. So what'd you do with your diet?
So I made sure that I was eating well, because typically when you're on the run, when you're an executive,
let's make sure he's not talking about being on the run from the law. He's talking about being on the run as a busy professional, right?
That's right.
Okay, so let's clarify that.
So when you are on the run as a busy professional, you have a lot of luncheons and dinners, and the food choices aren't always the best. But being back at home, being a stay-at-home dad now, which had its own blessings in disguise, I was able to really watch what I was eating. So I would make sure I'm getting lots of fruits and vegetables, making sure my lean proteins were adequate, and being able to exercise on a daily basis. And
So
all of those help me.
What do you do exercise-wise, and how much do you commit yourself to?
I commit to myself to an hour a day. On a very light day, it may just be a walk with simple calisthenics, push-ups, sit-ups, maybe some mild weightlifting. Other days, it may be going to the gym, taking a spin class, a weightlifting class, or pumping weights. One of the things that I like to do the most was really just take a walk on the trail with my wife, and we go down this scenic trail by a river locally and just unwind, talk, enjoy the nature and surrounding. And that had the additional benefits of uplifting our spirits through this tough time and simply getting some exercise in.
So an hour a day. Now, if you're a busy individual out there who thinks, oh my goodness, there's no way I have an hour a day, start smaller. Especially if you're a lady, understand that 12 minutes of getting your heart rate up, like high intensity interval training, is enough for a day. That's all I commit to. And I do my I do my cardio 3 times a week, and then I do my weights 3 times a week. 12 minutes is what I commit to. If I do more, that's super. But the other thing about women is there's data that shows that you can break up your hour and not have, and get the same full effects as if you did 1 hour contiguously. Not true for men, but true for women. So if you're a lady out there, you have that advantage. Start with 12 minutes and then see what else is possible. We've got the body under control. We've got with diet, with exercise. And the most important thing, of course, is controlling the thoughts, because this gets back to your original riddle and the answer to it. If you let what other people are saying about you dominate your thoughts, especially if you're under investigation, then you start to doubt yourself and mistrust yourself. And when you get into that mode, it's really hard to get out of it, because worry, fear, and doubt just immobilize people. So how did you combat that? Because it can be really difficult when everybody around you professionally is telling you one thing, and when you know in your heart something else is entirely true.
That's absolutely correct. And it is a difficult frame of mind to get yourself out of, because when I was leaving the jail cell after I posted bail, and on my way home, and through the news reports and the media chasing down my neighbors to get comments, the feeling that you have done something wrong is very prevalent because of all the scrutiny, all the pressure that you feel under yourself. I combated that really by getting back to what you said in the Maslow's hierarchy, in that I went to fight or flight. And I knew I had to fight because this was very serious, and I was preparing myself for which I initially thought was going to be a quick fight, but it actually dragged on for about 15 months before I had my day in court.
15 months of that kind of stress. What would you do when those thoughts would come into your mind that, oh, I'm a loser, or oh, I must have done something wrong, or people wouldn't be treating me this way?
Well, it really went back to the basics, because I can't tell you, Lori, that I went through this experience and not have any of those thoughts. But I made sure, again, that I was seeing my counselor, and I spent some time writing. I said, this is a great time that I can chronicle some of the details of this story, because the details were so incredible. And by journaling and writing about them, some things are completely out of my control. And as a result of them being out of my control, I have to let them go and let the process flow. When I was able to let things that were under my direct control go, that's when I was able to start to look forward and start looking towards the way I was going to come out of this.
I know that when we talk about strengthening the mind, the mind is part of our non-physical being, but it's not the only part of our non-physical being. I mean, we're spiritual, we're spiritual and physical. So what do you do to nurture that spiritual part of you when you're in this situation?
For me, it really strengthened my own faith. I knew that there was going to be a long battle ahead of me. I knew that there was a reason for this. And standing here where I did on earth, I couldn't understand why I was going through this, but I know that at some point it would become clear because it's all a part of God's plan, no matter what. And I was able to use my faith, and just like with my family and friends, relationships strengthened over this time. My faith also strengthened. If
you're wondering where to start with that, just pick up the Bible and start reading it every day. Make a habit. Spiritual growth is because you form good habits. It's just like exercise. It's just like everything else. So that's so important. You're absolutely right. Have you ever seen this book, Maxwell Maltz's book, Psycho-Cybernetics?
Yes, I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
Maxwell Maltz was a plastic surgeon. He could transform anybody. But what he discovered is that he had a small percentage of patients that no matter how much he changed them, when the bandages came off of their face, they could only see the distorted figure they were before the surgery. And he started asking himself why, and he developed a way to change that so that people could see who they really were after a change, because he thought that was so fascinating. And one of his big points in this book, and I highly recommend that if anybody's going through a stressful time, besides reading Dr. Jarrett's book, License to Live, pick up Psycho-Cybernetics. I read this probably once every 3 years. And the big thing he says is as soon as that thought enters your mind, say inside or outside if you're alone, I reject that thought. It's that simple. When a thought comes in, you can either accept it, reject it, or neglect it. And so if you simply just say, like if that thought comes in, oh man, I'm such a loser. Wait, I reject that thought. It's incredibly powerful for your subconscious mind to know that you are actively rejecting a thought that's coming in from your sensorial factors. I'm sure you did that time and time again. And, because that's the only way you get through is to reject those thoughts initially and then have people around you who enforce the fact that you are right in rejecting those thoughts. It helps. Now, your situation is very similar to what we read about in the book, Man's Search for Meaning. That's about the German concentration camp. That is like the most extreme case. But the lesson was that ultimately you control your own freedom, which is your message too. Even though it's nice to have that outside support system, what I love about your book and what your mission is now is you're teaching people how to develop inside themselves a strong enough support system that no matter what stress comes up, they're ready. Is that accurate?
That is absolutely correct. It's all about putting things in perspective. And in my case, I knew that I couldn't control the legal system. I couldn't control the state medical board. They all had their processes that they had to go through. But what I could control is the way I felt about myself, the way I could continue to help others, and the way I could continue to support my family and friends, much as they have supported me throughout this ordeal. And that's exactly some of the main points that I want to get out with this License to Live book. People go through devastating circumstances all the time, and especially when you are a professional or even a physician, you are placed in a spot that, well, a physician is supposed to have a wonderful life, and they're driving the finest cars and they're touring all around the world on all these things. And well, physicians know that this isn't true. However, it is the persona that society places upon you. And when you are trying to live up to that persona, you're missing the boat on so many other things. And so that is really what I'm trying to tell people, that even under dire circumstances, there are some things under your control and you are able to move forward, and you must move forward as one of your survival tactics.
It's march or die, right?
Absolutely.
It's march or die. So, and there are times in life when that happens. At least for me, I've found that focusing on just the next step helps. if I can just get there, then we'll see what else is possible. What did you have any experiences like that, where you just had to stop looking far out and just had to say, okay, it's this small. Let's just take the step.
Yes. And I can remember that specifically after, even without me making a statement, Pennsylvania, New York, the DEA all gave me my certifications and licenses back, even prior to my criminal trial. They did whatever investigation they needed to do and said, okay, let's let this go. But I knew that with National Practitioner Data Bank reports and things like that, and even the way that I felt kind of coming out of a large hospital system, I knew that I would depend on myself and no one would believe in myself more than I would. And if I didn't believe in myself, then nobody else would. And as a result, I was able to take a step. And I didn't exactly know what that step was going to be. But for me, that first step is when I decided to start my own LLC.
Was that hard or easy?
It actually seemed like it was going to be incredibly hard because I'd never done anything like that. And like many of us that work for hospitals and other practices and organizations, you actually just kind of get used to people doing things for you. In my case, after I did a little bit of internet research, I said, oh, this really isn't that big of a deal. And I was able to take that step. It was a very simple step. And I said, okay, I took another step forward.
Awesome. That is a great example. And if you've never considered incorporating yourself, getting an LLC, getting a family limited partnership, these tools are all very important tools. And you can learn more about that at thedoctorsmentor.com. My own attorney that I use, Erin Thrash, I've interviewed her, and she kind of goes through the basics of when you're first getting out of medical school, the steps you should take to start off right so that later you're not learning, oh, gee, I wish I had done this 10 years ago.
There's more to explore at thedoctorsmentor.com.
I wanted to talk a little bit about how your experience affected your personal relationships, because this can be very stressful for the people around you. Is there something you would say to people about how do you make sure that the people around you are not giving so much of themselves to your stress that they feel abandoned too? How did you combat that?
Yes, that's a very real factor. With your interpersonal relationships, it'll always start with your inner person. So you have to look at yourself first and see where you are. In my case, I was having ups and downs throughout this ordeal. However, there were a lot of people out there that were caring for me, that were reaching out for me, particularly my wife and her support and the way she carried this stress as well. And we knew that in order for us to move on, we had to find ways to get rid of some of that, because the last thing I wanted to do is bring everyone down with me, so to speak. It really involved frank and open conversations about feelings and our relationships, because the people that are there for you, they're going to be there for you. And that's one of the things that I learned along the way. People that I didn't even think were that much there for me really were. So a lot of people stepped up out of all of this. I continued to make a positive mindset out of everything that I did. The positive mindset is what helped me go. And so for someone who was a busy executive, taking care of patients, taking care of others' families, in meetings from the crack of dawn till far past sunset, I wasn't at home for my own family. One of the biggest things that I found being suddenly a stay-at-home dad and never held in my house, I found that my relationships with my children, my relationships with my wife, my parents, my extended family, all of those relationships grew stronger, even with my close friends, because now I had time. I actually felt that I could really engage in these relationships and invest even more in the relationships than I had before. I would spend many days just pitching kickball to my sons and the neighborhood boys. And by doing that, even though I knew I was jobless, I knew I didn't have any income coming in, I said, you know what? It's a sunny day and I'm outside pitching kickball to my boys and their friends. What else could be better than that?
Right. Gratitude.
And by having that mindset, it carried me through with everything. I was able to see the positive in even the darkest of circumstances.
So you counted your blessings and you were grateful for them. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And sometimes, you were talking about writing before, about journaling, about the experience. And that's awesome because it gets it out of your mind and into the physical. And likewise, a gratitude journal for anybody who's facing stress like this is another way to physically, when you write, what's beautiful about writing with a pencil or pen on paper is you have created something physical, which makes it even more real for your own mind. Writing love letters to yourself, writing your gratitude journal, all of those things can just deepen that feeling and give you that strength inside. Those are tools that I share with patients and, the proteges I mentor all the time, because we forget that. We forget that when we're busy doing and giving so much in the hospital setting or the office setting sometimes. Is there anything else that is a critical lesson that you think that other doctors and other credentialed professionals who might find themselves in similar situations? I mean, okay, wait, before I even ask that one, when you went to jail, were you scared? What, I mean, we're like, oh my goodness, I'm surrounded by what happens in jail?
So I'll give you this snippet because this was an interesting story that I definitely spent some time writing in my journal. So I can't wait to really share it with people. But I was in the police station. They patted me down. They took all my possessions, placed me in handcuffs, and put me in the back of a paddy wagon. They did strap me in. And, as I'm looking at the blood smears on the walls and all the stains inside this paddy wagon bouncing around, going down the street and over to the jail, as I get out and get charged and get processed through the jail, everybody kind of had a look on their face like, what is this guy doing in here? Well, I felt the same way. But as I'm looking around at some of the cells that were full of guys that looked like they were having a party, they just looked like they were having the best time of their life, hanging out in a jail cell. There were some isolation cells, and when I remember, just like a movie, there was some guy with his eyes peering out, just glaring at everything and anything that was happening, not saying a word. And then there was a cell that I was placed into where I happened upon a guy named Manny, and he looked at me, and I was dressed similar with an Oxford shirt and some slacks, and he just eventually talked to me and said, well, hey, did they get you at work or something? Did they pick you up from work? And I said, well, no, I turned myself in today. And he asked me where I work, and I went on and I told him. And then he's paused for a minute. He looked at me again. He said, are you a doctor? And I said, well, yes, I am. And he said, oh, no, I can't believe it. Now they got a doctor in here. At the time, it wasn't funny, but and it was a scary place to be while I was waiting to sit before the judge. However, there are people from different walks of life with different circumstances. And Manny, much like myself, he was just someone that worked at the Little Apple Deli slicing meat and was trying to make a family. He was a veteran. He was trying to make his own life, where he got caught up in something that just did not define himself either. Having that experience again shows that no matter what, people are coming from different walks of life. And when you can always find something in common with anyone.
It sounds like Manny helped you know that when you were in there, the point was to never give up.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Is there anything else that's super critical that you think other doctors and other credentialed professionals who might get blindsided by a situation like this, or maybe some physical thing or some other situation that they need to know? Yes.
One of the things I found is that although I felt isolated, I felt like I was the only person this was happening to on earth. This actually type of thing happens often to physicians, nurses, radiology techs, and they all get ushered through the system. Some of them may be high profile, some may not be, but this is not an uncommon event. One of the things that I would say is that people need to be prepared for a fight. And although in my mind, I thought, well, this will be a 3-month thing, I can get back to my job. But understanding the process of this and the system and the tactics used by whether it's prosecution or just the limitations of the system at large, you need to prepare yourself for the long haul and how you're going to weather this storm. Because if you find yourself in a situation like this where there are some false allegations made against you, I thought it was going to be 3 months of my life and I would be done. It took me 15 months of my life before I was able to prove my innocence in a court of law and be set free. And realizing there was still going to be residual damage, even though all of my licenses and certifications had been restored. So people must understand how they're going to weather that storm, both financially, both from their physical health, their mental health. And it is key that you reach out and get help.
Your next step.
Dr. Jarrett Patton, author of License to Live. Where can people find your book?
People can go to licensetoLive.com. They can purchase the paperback right now, and it's available for your reading. I hope that people will get this book in their hands and really give them a different perspective on how to get through a severe transition as I have done. And I would certainly be willing to help others do the same.
Thank you so much for talking about a subject that, frankly, most doctors don't want to talk about. They don't want to think about it. And it's so important because you can get prepared. You can be strong. You can be ready for that fight. Just like, Muhammad Ali didn't go into the ring unprepared. He won because he trained. That's what we need to do. We need to strengthen ourselves. And you are a great example of that. Thank you so much, Dr. Jarrett, for coming on the show.
Thank you again, Lori, for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Are you stopping at a hospital? Hello? Don't you know that hospitals are one of the sickest places on the planet? Don't touch anything in there and get out as fast as you can.